Hi, I'm Dylan Cox and this is my Froch v Groves breakdown. WBA IBF super middleweight champion Carl Froch defends his titles against mandatory contender George Groves on Saturday night at the Phones for You Arena in Manchester. Groves is a massive underdog and many people think it's come too soon for him even though he's put himself into the mandatory position. Many people feel that he hasn't got the experience at top world level to beat someone like Carl Froch, who is indestructible and undroppable almost over 12 rounds. Of course he has been down against Jermaine Taylor and he has been wobbled a few times in his career, but that chin is cast out of granite. Talking to Groves' interim trainer Paddy Fitzpatrick yesterday, I found out a little bit about their mindset going into this fight. They're extremely confident, but they're listing 4 main fights that they feel that have shown gaps in Carl Froch that they can exploit. Now, those fights are the Andre Dirrell fight, the Andre Ward fight, the Mikael Kessler fight, and the Jermaine Taylor fight. 2 of those fights Froch lost clearly on the cards against Mikael Kessler and against Andre Ward. And the other 2 pulling all the stops out against Taylor to stop him in the last round, even though he was down on all cards going up to that point, and a tricky win against Dirrell in his first fight in the Super 6. Now, I'm not going to break all of those individual fights down, but basically Paddy was saying that, you know, there's elements from each of those fights that George can expose Froch with. So the hand and foot speed of Dirrell, for example, he showed that Froch can't deal with a guy who's very fast on their feet too well. Andre Ward, the inside fighting, that sort of very technical inside fighting, but also just being quite strong on the inside. Can Groves do that? I'm not so sure. Jermaine Taylor boxing behind a very beautiful jab, quick and sharp. Is Groves' jab as good as Jermaine Taylor's was back then? I don't think so. And then the Kessler fight, shoot from the hip, gunslinger fight. I mean, Froch hasn't been in, Groves hasn't been in a war like that. You don't know how he's going to fare. So I don't know if I buy into that sort of train of thought. Yes, I do think there's massive, you know, in a lot of Froch's fights, he looks awkward sometimes. He throws this awkward jab. He gets hit a lot. You know, he's not got the fastest feet. He sort of arm punches a lot of the time, you know, and he doesn't look that bad. But as I said to Paddy, he might just be, and I think he is, one of those guys that looks a lot easier to beat. But when you're actually in the ring, it's a completely different thing, as Lucien Boutte found out, as a lot of the guys in the Super 6 found out. So for George Groves to win, what's he going to have to do to beat Carl Froch? Well, he's going to have to box with him a bit. Froch can be outboxed. I think Groves is quite a decent boxer. I think he lands some beautiful counter shots, but he is like a little mini David Haye sometimes, just not as quick and not as explosive. But he does have that similar style. He's got that similar kind of rhythm, that waiting rhythm. Doesn't throw a huge amount of punches like a lot of Adam Booth fighters over the years haven't. He waits for his shots. It's about timing with those guys, and they throw the right hand and they make it land and then they move out. You know, against the DeGale, he got a lot of credit, him and Booth, for this wonderful game plan. Basically, they boxed on the back foot and made the counterpuncher and DeGale come forward. But I was there live for that fight, and I thought Groves barely got the win, if got the win at all. It was hardly a masterpiece. And I mean, those 2 guys that were very, you know, novice-y in the pro ranks at the time, and he hasn't really fought at a much higher level than that since then. I mean, Glencoff Johnson was well past it when he fought him. I mean, he was pretty past it when Froch fought him, and Froch struggled with him. So that's another example that, you know, Froch isn't this monster that people make him out to be. He can be outboxed, he can be hit. But I'm just wondering if Groves can be able to do that for 12 solid rounds. So what am I thinking Groves is going to do? I think he's going to box for the first few rounds. I think he's going to check him out, going to see how quick Froch actually is in the ring, how good that long reach of Froch is, if he can get some success with the jab, because I'm sure that's what McCracken wants him to do. Although Froch seems quite hot-headed going into this fight, I have a feeling that McCracken's going to sort of try and rein him in a bit and get him to box and then slowly put the pressure on. But Groves will be trying to box with Carl, be trying to move with him, be trying to land single shots and then getting out of the way. He doesn't want to really mix out with Carl because, as we saw in the Boutte fight, you know, once Carl's there in distance, he can unload, but he does throw kind of like arm punches a lot of the time, and it's like they're thudding punches, but they're not crisp, sharp shots, which George will be throwing. So I think he can get through with them, and I think George has got quite a good jab if he gets it working, and just land through the middle, right hand, step away, move out, and then set again and go. But we'll just have to see how Groves copes with the pressure of an animal like Carl Froch. It will just keep coming relentlessly at you for 12 rounds. What's Froch's main game plan going into this? I mean, I don't know, but like I said, I think he's going to box, have a little feel out, and then try and turn the screw a bit. But as he did against Boutte, he probably had all these kind of plans worked out with Rob McCracken, and then when he got in the ring, he really wanted to make a point, and he made that point. If he's in that mindset, it could spell trouble for Groves, but I think Groves is a very smart guy, and I think he's probably expecting, you know, all this winding Froch up is obviously to try and get him to come and do that, so he can try and pick him off. It's just whether he can take the heat when it's turned right up to white hot levels, because I think he's going to really find a lot out about himself in that ring, because he's not had any challenges to date that could test him at that level. I mean, Alcoba, Glencoff Johnson, past it, Glencoff Johnson, you know, Kenny Anderson, I'm just reading off names off the top of my head. Those guys aren't going to push him to the level that Carl Froch is. But you look into an eyes of a fighter sometimes when you're speaking to them, and you can see confidence. And George Groves, it's not like he's convincing himself. It's not. He's just saying it because he's scared and he wants to get through the fight. He's saying it because he deeply believes that Carl Froch isn't as good as people are making him out to be. I tend to agree with that to a certain extent. I think, you know, having been through the Super 6, Carl's got way more credit for the run of fights he's had than the actual performances within those fights. So he didn't look great in a lot of the fights through the Super 6. He didn't look great against Jermaine Taylor before the Super 6. There's this sort of, especially Sky, they love Carl Froch. You know, they did a lot to bring him back onto Sky when he was sort of in obscurity on primetime and stuff. And they obviously, you know, it was a big gamble, the Butte fight. Eddie Hearn said so himself. And I think Sky are just, you know, placing a lot behind Froch, and you know, they're making him out to be this amazing world champion. Now, he is an amazing person for what he's done for the sport and how he's done it, but you have to look at each fight individually, and I can kind of see where Paddy Fitzpatrick and Groves are coming from when they see these openings, because he's not a perfect fighter, Carl Froch, far from it. I just think the question is, can George exploit those openings? And I don't think he can. And you know, as much as I wouldn't be shocked to see a win by Groves on points, it's really about how emotionally involved in this fight Froch is, and whether he makes the mistakes and falls into the traps that Groves will be setting. I can't see it being a full-on war like Kessler versus Froch. I can't see it being a sort of virtuoso performance from Groves a la Ward. I can see it somewhere in between the two, where Groves is going to have to overcome some adversity if he's going to win, but ultimately he'll be trying to win by boxing and goading Froch in. And Froch will try to win in the Butte fashion, or he'll have to grind out a win, late stoppage or something like that, like the Jermaine Taylor fight where he's behind a little bit but he's just persistent enough to get there. So that's how I think the fight may pan out, but that's going to change obviously once I've seen the guys tomorrow at the final press conference, and hopefully I'll be getting interviews for you guys with both of those two and with Eddie Hearn and other luminaries that will be there to give you a feel for the event. And my thoughts may change as the week goes on and we get closer to Saturday, because once you see the guys tomorrow and once you see them on the scales, you might find those little extra bits out that you weren't sure of before. So it's hard to make a prediction, but I'll have my prediction video up on Friday night following the weigh-in. Then Saturday I'll just bring you some last little bits before the main event on Saturday night, and we'll do a wrap up on Sunday. So stay tuned to Seconds Out on YouTube for all the latest stuff. We've got Radio Raheem out in the States. Don't forget, if you haven't seen it, Freddie Roach getting kicked in the chest by his former colleague, strength and conditioning coach Alex Ariza. Obviously Roach brought him into the fold. Ariza had worked in boxing before that, but they had some success with Pacquiao, other fighters, and then they split. So obviously tension there. Robert Garcia was sat there, training thing, mess up with schedules and times. Roach sort of kicked off a little bit, and Alex Ariza literally kicked him in the chest. If you haven't seen that video, check it out on the channel. Radio Raheem's bringing you all the stuff from Macau over there in China, making sure that you're getting absolutely everything, press conferences, one-to-ones, everything for the build-up to the fight. So make sure you check that. Don't forget to comment, share, and like this video. Stay tuned for more videos from me. Froch versus Groves Saturday night, big undercut, and then we're over to Macau with Radio Raheem.